Our next speaker, Rachel Armstrong, is a doctor who abandoned general practice to move into experimental biology and is therefore, in part, a pioneer in a new field called living architecture. She wants to transform buildings from being sterile, inert objects into entities that interact and evolve with the natural environment. Buildings that can heal themselves, buildings that can even grow organically. And if that all sounds a little bit sci-fi, it's because she's also a sci-fi writer. So please meet Rachel.
So I want you to imagine what it might be like if you're standing in the middle of a city and you are as invigorated by your surroundings as you might currently feel if you were standing in a park or a garden. Or perhaps imagine how healthy you might feel if our buildings performed the same kind of work as our plants did. For example, take carbon dioxide and trap sunlight in it and turn it into products that were useful to us and nurtured us. Or perhaps just imagine an urban landscape where all the forms that you see are as rich and as varied as we find in nature. I know I write science fiction novels, but this is a reality, and I believe that this is possible. And in fact, I've actually moved from writing about these kinds of visions to actually doing them and building them. And this requires, though, us to have a completely different relationship and a fundamental understanding of our technology and nature. Because currently, we see them as being two completely different things. In fact, we're experiencing a toxic relationship. We have technology on one hand, we have nature on the other hand, and the two aren't talking. And quite frankly, that's killing us. So what I'm interested in doing, and what I'm driven to do, is to find a way of creating a meaningful and engaged dialogue between our technology and nature, and getting something that's akin to a support system, a survival system, a city that helps us survive the 21st century and beyond. Now again, that may sound like science fiction, but in fact, I've called upon deeper powers, the powers that are here within the earth to help me resolve this seeming conflict. And that is the terrestrial chemistry and physics that gave rise to life. Life, vitality, transformation, the ability of stuff here to do things without humans telling it what to do. We've had such an arrogance in the 19th and 20th century in particular, where we think we know best and we beat our nature into submission. We not only beat nature, but we beat all materials into submission. And we're then surprised that we have a toxic chemical relationship with our technology. Well, the doctor in me wants to transform that. And I think this is possible because we overlook so much that's here on Earth and is available to us. Yesterday, we heard from Sylvia Earle that 2/3 of the planet is pretty much unexplored for us. Well, I'll reveal another dimension, and that is the terrestrial chemistry that we think we know that's actually underneath our noses is also incredibly unexplored. And essentially what I'm doing is I'm finding a chemical language to start this dialogue, to kickstart a transformative process whereby our technology and nature are working together. And nature already has a language. It's called a metabolism. It's a big word, I know, but essentially it's about turning one group of substances into another, using or producing energy in order to create a state of transformation. Now, all living systems do that. But in our ultimate wisdom, when we made our technology, We didn't bother putting in this cyclical survival process in our technology. And so what I'm doing is I'm creating a new set of materials that literally bridge that gap, that talk the language of metabolism, this cyclical, sustainable chemistry, and reconnect these two seemingly separate entities through physics and chemistry. And it's real. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you some of the chemistry that I'm working with, and I would like you to just think about what it is that you're seeing, because essentially this is a system called a protocell. Proto meaning before, cell, as we all know, these little tiny entities that form our bodies, that shape the living world. Now, what's extraordinary about this system is that it's just an oil droplet in some water. There's a little bit of alkali in the water, and that causes a destabilization of the outside of the protocell itself. So what you're seeing is something that is actually not technically alive because it doesn't have any DNA. It does not have the information processing system that our biology has, which we say that is the driver of identity, the driver of intention, within all living processes on the planet. And what this system does is it shows you just how extraordinary very simple chemistry can be. There are only about 5 different components in these systems. There's extra virgin olive oil, some water, some alkali, and a little bit of surfactant, a little bit of soap in there that destabilizes the membrane. And that's how it creates its energy. The energy is at the interface between the oil and water. So what you're seeing is something called a living technology. So it is not biology. This is not a bacterium. This is about the size of half of your little fingernail. It's actually a few millimeters big. And because it doesn't have any DNA, I can program this little entity, which can move around its environment, it can sense it, and it can undergo complex chemical interactions, just being simple yet complex. And you can see in this environment as well, it's able to create a product that changes with time. And this is the kinds of basic properties that I'm working with, and I'm using general chemistry to program these little entities in order to create this new generation of materials. Because unlike our biological systems, this has a much greater solution space. By not being limited by DNA, we can actually create dynamic processes, healing processes in very toxic environments, because they're not vulnerable to the same kinds of interactions that our biology would be in these environments. And so what's really curious about these little things are that they're very sociable. They actually like each other. Remember, this is just oil and water and a little bit of chemistry in there. And you can see that they have this chemical dialogue. There's got the little fella here is kind of talking to the big fella, which is shedding this skin, and it's growing this like mini architecture. And the one on the top right there is really feeling left out. And in fact, they kind of hang out in colonies. So you may think, how can one little entity turn into a material? This is my favorite movie of all time. I'm going to show you. Draw your attention to this little group here. Here's the home team, here's the away team, and the away team are coming to check out what's happening at the home team. This is something that has actually never been seen before. Just want to see you concentrate on what happens next. Right, I don't know what that was. I can describe it very simply as a phase transition between two very similar populations of not cells, pre-cells, and yet they are capable of doing something utterly surprising that we could not predict with digital modeling. Now, if little tiny balls of fat are capable of such incredible feats of ingenuity, and I am anthropomorphizing them, then what are we capable of? And I think that we are thinking ourselves into a situation where stasis is the status quo, and it's our survival strategy. And this is no good. And I'm going to draw your attention again to some of the other things that these little protocells can do. I mean, for this little one here, it's a chemical kind of death. It's given up the ghost because it's made too much product, and it's kind of intoxicating, and it's floating around, and it's kind of out of the picture. They have this kind of limited lifespan, but yet, within that limited lifespan, they're capable of incredible transformation. And I call these my protocell roses. I have no idea how these little fat droplets became so biological-like in their appearance, but I was only just absolutely amazed and very privileged to experience that. Now, I can induce these changes. You know, this is not a one-off set of circumstances, but it's much more like dealing with a recipe, like for cooking. I know that if I put some fat and some water and some alkali together, I'm going to roughly get cake. But whether it's a currant cake or a chocolate cake, or whether it's a fluffy sponge cake, or whether it's one of those little flat things that I normally make that look like more like a biscuit, you know, these are the kinds of varieties that we can get, but we know the conditions for cake in these. So we do have an idea of what they might be, although we're not totally in control of the outcomes. But that's a good thing, because we're actually delegating some of the intelligence and some of the kind of creativity to these chemical entities that are able to help us out and help us solve relevant problems. Now, again, I just want to stress that this is not fiction. I'm working on an installation with a Canadian architect, Philip Beasley, who is the selection for the Venice Biennale for Canada. And we're actually introducing these materials into his incredible architecture. It's an installation that uses the latest in digital technology and cybernetics and creates a responsive framework that can sense the environment. It senses airflow. It responds to dust in the atmosphere and creates these showers, and it can sense you. It's got little digital sensors. So components within this framework actually lick you and sniff at you as you walk around it. So within this incredibly shivering, quivering landscape, I've situated my new sets of materials in little flasks, and they can do some interesting things. So for example, this one is a bit like an embryo. It changes from a soft thing to a hard thing through different phases with time. I put it there because I just think it undergoes this very rich kind of fire-like transition, which reminds me of volcanoes. This is one that can fix carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and turn it into little pearls, which are building blocks for construction. This one is a set of membranes that can grow beyond their containers towards food sources. And essentially the provocation then is that these living materials start to colonize a technological framework. And by working together, by situating these strange materials within a conventional, although creatively conventional technological architecture, we start to create a new kind of architectural experience, which is more akin to the gardens that I referred to at the beginning of the talk. And I kind of just want you to reflect a second on what I think is really important about this. I think it is really important for us to totally transform the way that we think. I don't mean incremental changes towards the same assumed goalpost, because no matter how well-intentioned we are, no matter how vigorous we are in our intentions, we're going to reach the same conclusion. And I personally would like to prove Margaret Atwood wrong. We are not doomed. We can do this, but we must think qualitatively differently about what it is that we're doing. And when we do that, when we embrace transformation and transgression and all these things that are available to us on the planet if we look for them and if our minds are open to them, then we get new science, we get new technology, we get business opportunities that have been unimaginable before. We work symbiotically, we work together using what we've got. We don't need to invent lots of new stuff. We work with what we've got, but we do it in a very intelligent, engaged way. And I think that not only will we survive the 21st century, but we're going to leave it in a much better condition than the way we found it. Thank you.